The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those Knuckleheads of Liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty. We're coming to you on December 19th, 2022. And boy, I tell you, it seems like these last few years have been a political slog. But I tell you, we have a departure on that today. We're going to talk with Jacob Huebert, and he is an attorney and president of the Liberty Justice Center. And so they wind up doing a lot of, fights in the legal realm for a lot of these efforts on liberty. And so, but before we get to that, let me introduce you to our panel. In our upper left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our upper right-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. And in our lower left-hand corner, we have Jacob Huebert, and he is president of the Liberty Justice Center. My name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host today. So, James, maybe we could pull up the visual while we let Jacob tell us about this organization, Liberty Justice Center, and what some of their efforts are going on right now in fighting for liberty.
Yeah, thank you. So the Liberty Justice Center is a public interest legal organization that exists to go to court to advance liberty. We want to advance liberty not only for our clients who are threatened by the government in some way, but by establishing new precedents that will protect other people's liberty in the future. And we do that in a variety of areas. One of the main areas, and an important one right now, is the First Amendment. We also seek to expand educational freedom, and we're also fighting the unprecedented government overreach we're seeing lately as executive branch officials assert more and more authority, even without authorization from the legislature. And so we're doing this across a variety of fronts. And of course, lately, there's no shortage of work to do. And as a public interest legal organization, we represent all of our clients for free. They never pay anything. And our work is instead funded by donors who support what we're doing and want to protect people's liberty and want to see a stronger protection for liberty through court decisions.
So, Jacob, what did you mean when you said protecting or expanding people's educational freedom? What did you mean by that?
Well, that can come in a variety of ways. Of course, one way that people have known about for a long time is through school choice, the idea that, well, if the government is going to force people to pay for schools and force children to go to some school, you should at least have a choice as to where you take that money and what you do with it. So, of course, you've had more and more demand for this in recent years, as people are more and more dissatisfied with their public schools, whether that's because they were closed for COVID or because schools were forcing their children to wear masks and take other ridiculous measures if they go to school, or because the schools are pushing values on children that their parents disapprove of. People more and more want out. And so there are programs such as educational savings account programs where you get to take your money where you want for your child's education. And we have successfully defended those. And there's other things related to educational freedom. There's also the idea that if you are going to a public school, that you shouldn't be forced to repeat ideological things that the government wants you to say. We have fought back against that. We've fought back against schools punishing, for example, we represent a high school principal in Tennessee who made, after January 6th, a very simple statement about how we should listen to people we disagree with and so forth, and was suspended for that. So we fought back against that. And we fight back against mandates also that force people in schools to take vaccines, wear masks, that sort of thing. And then we're also very interested not only in helping people who are in traditional schools have more freedom, but also give parents more freedom to do innovative new things. Things like micro schools, where you get together with a few of your neighbors and your kids sort of study on their own and somebody looks over them. That started proliferating during COVID, of course, because parents couldn't take advantage of ordinary schools, or they had to do so in some ridiculous, cumbersome way. And it seems like the government and the teachers' unions, who are, of course, a big enemy of educational freedom, kind of turned a blind eye to that for a while. I think they were too busy trying to keep schools closed to think about that sort of thing. But now I think they are noticing, and they're trying to crack down on this a little more. And so we're here and prepared to fight for the rights of parents who are doing that, and any other kind of thing that they want to do to educate their child in the way that they think best.
Just curious, when you talk about some of these issues, like what's going on in the schools and all that, how long does it take to get the legal response side of things going? Like, these things, they happen and we hear about them and it's, horrifying news. Is that something then that sort of a legal response kicks in, and what is it, maybe a 6-month window, a year? Roughly how long does it take for there to be sort of a pushback to some of these entities like the teachers unions and others who are sort of abusing people's liberties?
Well, we try to respond very quickly to threats as they arise. We're a relatively small organization, and that we're not big and bureaucratic, and we can kind of adjust our plans and priorities quickly to address the latest threats. So in terms of actually filing something, we've been able to respond pretty quickly to these things. But of course, getting the courts to respond quickly is another matter. Now, a lot of times, if the government is doing something really bad, you want to go to court and immediately get an injunction to stop the government from doing whatever it's doing immediately, at least until the case can be resolved. And that's the ideal, and sometimes you can get that. But sometimes you can't get that immediate relief. And yeah, the unfortunate thing is these cases can take a long time to play out. And unfortunately, there's generally nothing that forces a judge to rule in a case on any particular timetable. They can take as long as they want. But we try to get preliminary injunctions against these things, and some judges, recognizing the threats, will jump on them very quickly. But if they don't, then it is something that could take 6 months, a year. If you're talking about appeals, if you're talking about potentially having to go to the Supreme Court, you could talk about multiple years. So that's one challenge in this kind of work. One frustrating thing about this kind of work is that it can take a while. And of course, sometimes if people face a threat in a particular school year, or there's somebody who's going to eventually graduate from school, the problem could be over for them by the time you get a decision. But even if that happens, then you hope you can at least get that court precedent to help other people in the future.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. So are you guys doing any work with in terms of advancing liberty on the university campuses, where there have been a lot of problems, especially in the free speech arena?
Yeah, we have been. We have a case in the works soon on behalf of somebody. Since it hasn't been filed, I won't say exactly where it is, at a public university who's out there distributing information, gets punished by the university. That's something that we definitely take an interest in and are fighting back against. We represented a student at the at a university, a public university in Indiana, who was punished or at least investigated based on the school giving you an ID card that you have to use to get around campus, and they track your movements, and they say, well, you were in a particular place in a particular time. And we argued in that case, that's a violation of your Fourth Amendment rights to be tracked everywhere you go just because you go to a university like that. So yeah, we're very alert to the threat on university campuses. And then also, especially, I think we've been focused on just the K through 12 schools, where your people are forced to go to this thing and forced to give up their rights. That's a really disturbing threat, as is the university situation, which has all sorts of other problems.
Do you guys partner, Jacob, with groups like FIRE and other things in your efforts, or do you guys is it sort of a go it alone type of thing? I'm just curious how these things usually work out.
No, we're happy to partner with a lot of different organizations. I don't know that we've ever had a lawsuit where we were actually on it with FIRE, but certainly we talked to them. We talked to lots of different groups all over the country who are active in the areas we're interested in. A lot of states have their own sort of state-focused liberty-oriented legal organization. And so we love to partner with them because a lot of times they will be able to connect us to a client. They'll know people there in the state who are affected and be able to connect us and partner with us on that. They may know the local courts better. So we definitely look to partner with other organizations. And we think that that enables everybody to do more, because a local organization might not have, or a state-based organization might not have a lot of experience in a particular area of constitutional law, but they know the local jurisdiction well. And we might not know the local area well, but we know the constitutional law well. And so I think that there are fortunately more and more groups out there litigating for liberty. And we don't view it so much as competition, but as an opportunity to actually sort of grow the pie of liberty-oriented litigation. So we're very happy to do that with various groups.
So I'm sorry, Tim was going to say something? No. Okay.
No, just bobbing up and down.
Oh, okay. But Jacob, do you guys do any Second Amendment work?
We have not done any Second Amendment work. Of course, I strongly support Second Amendment rights. That's a little bit of a specialized area. And fortunately, there are legal organizations focused very tightly on that. And so, although we support it, we choose to focus on things where where you don't have that level of specialization that you need for the Second Amendment work, and where there aren't groups like very specifically filling that niche.
Okay.
Jacob, I have a question for you guys. Is there any kind of like a litmus test or anything when you guys bring people into your firm? Like, is there sort of a commitment to liberty by the lawyers working there? We had Mark Victor on our show once, and he told us, I'm not sure if he told us or I just saw in looking at his site, that I guess he has a litmus test where he asks people working for him if they're, all behind liberty and freedom and stuff. So I wasn't sure if you guys have any kind of a sort of a focused mission like that with all the people, or is it just sort of you hire the people who, lawyer does a good job for whoever their client is type of thing?
Well, for this kind of work, you definitely have to be passionate about the mission. You definitely have to care about advancing liberty. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody who works for the Liberty Justice Center is exactly aligned in all of their views. Some of us may lean a little bit more in the conservative direction on some issues. Some of us may be all the way libertarian, as I am, but there are so many threats to liberty right now that we all can agree on, and that it's not an issue. You want really good people who are committed to advancing liberty, excuse me, in these important areas. And so, commitment to the mission is a must, but that doesn't mean we all think exactly alike. I don't think you could staff any kind of organization like this with people who all think exactly alike. But if you're basically aligned with our liberty-oriented mission and you're good at what you do, then you're the kind of person we want here.
Well, Jacob, there's a question I had too, and this sort of that last one sort of leads into this. Given that we've talked about a lot about the schools and government schools and sort of how they can be a little heavy-handed with direction a lot of times, and it seems like also so many of us are focused through that a lot of these solutions in life are government solutions and such like that. What is it that sort of woke you up personally to liberty and sort of gave you a spark to get into this fight?
Well, I've been into liberty for a really long time. As a kid, like a 12-year-old kid, I kind of started listening to talk radio and picked up on some conservative ideas, and that started getting me thinking about political ideas. And I generally liked the sound of the less government thing. It made sense to me. And then when I was in high school, somebody put me on to the Freeman magazine, which the Foundation for Economic Education published for decades. That was one of the major publications of the libertarian movement for a long time. And then it really started to click. I started to see, there's a consistent philosophy here of less government across the board that makes sense. And I learned about free market economics, and that all made sense. And so I started reading more economics. I read books by people like Harry Brown and Ayn Rand, and it started really rounding out my thinking. And I went to college at a school called Grove City College in Pennsylvania, which is one of a handful of schools, one of only two at the time, I think, that doesn't take any government money at all, so that they won't have any government control. And they teach Austrian economics there in the economics department. And so between all that stuff, I got a really solid background in it. And then I learned of the work that people were doing to advance liberty in the courts. For a long time, there weren't that many groups. The main one people knew about was the Institute for Justice, which has been doing a lot of great work in the courts for a long time. And so I was a fan, and I followed that stuff as I started my legal career. And then I was fortunate when I had moved to Chicago, where the Liberty Justice Center's offices are, and I learned that they were starting this organization, and I just jumped right on that opportunity to combine my interest in liberty generally with my career. And I'm very glad I did, because it's the most rewarding legal work that I can imagine.
Well, you're just curious too, you mentioned a connection to Chicago. So Liberty Justice Center's there. Do you guys have any connections with the Chicago School of Economics? I know you mentioned Austrian economics, and I know that's where Milton Friedman used to teach there in Chicago for so many years.
Yeah, well, I did go to the University of Chicago for law school, and so I certainly was exposed to kind of Chicago ideas along those lines. I don't know that it influences us too much at the Liberty Justice Center. Our office is there, but actually our attorneys are all over the country. When I started, it wasn't that way. When I started, we all went into an office there in Chicago. But when everybody started working remotely, I think we recognized that, well, if people are going to work remotely, why don't we get the best people we can, no matter where they are? And as a result of that, I don't have to live in Chicago anymore. I reached my limit with COVID in Chicago, and so now I get to live in Austin, Texas, and do this.
Oh, I see. But you just spoke about the limited government as being, the ideal thing. Where we draw the lines, I guess, is where we are fighting now, is in terms of keeping government in its constitutional place. But we know the government have gone way beyond its constitutional mandate. We know that, and we are always stuck with this thing where the government expands and our liberties and our freedoms get squeezed in the process. So, what do you think will reverse that trend? What do you think will really put us back on the path to that liberty, quote unquote, utopia? I mean, we will never get there, but of course we hope that we could always be walking in that direction. What do you think about that?
Well, it's certainly not going to come through court decisions alone. There's no magic bullet Supreme Court decision that's going to reverse course. It's going to be essential, of course, for a critical mass of people to demand liberty and to push back against this. And if you don't have that, if the people who are trying to steer our society in the opposite direction win through their efforts to infiltrate the schools, the universities, the media, and make everybody not care about liberty, not want it anymore, and make people behave the way so many did during the COVID lockdowns, then we're going to be in trouble. So education is always, I think, the key component to it. Getting people to understand the value of liberty, creating a culture that values liberty. And there's just a lot of different things that have to happen for people to demand that. And of course, in recent years, it's been pretty easy to be pretty pessimistic about that, seeing how people responded when the government told them stay in your house for months and months and wear a mask when you go anywhere and that sort of thing. But now it feels like maybe the tide is turning a little bit. You see all the pushback against this through the changes at Twitter lately, and the people feeling a little freer to speak and feeling like maybe these powers that be aren't invincible if you can break that a little bit. So you can't identify any one thing that needs to happen, but you definitely need a culture of liberty and appreciation of liberty. And so that's fundamental. And we all do our part in different ways as libertarians to move us in that direction.
Yeah, you mentioned education, and that was a big part of your story, was a lot of self-education too, to bring you to the point you're at now. So yeah, I have to agree that education is absolutely crucial.
Indeed.
Yeah, that's right. And educating for liberty isn't easy, in the sense that it probably won't work to sort of to force the ideas on people. Their ideas, by their nature, you kind of have to come to yourself a little bit. And so I always like the idea that was put forth by Leonard Read, the founder of the Foundation for Economic Education, big figure in the libertarian movement history. The first and foremost thing we need to do is to educate ourselves and improve ourselves, set a good example for others, and hopefully through that process and through articulating our ideas clearly, people will be drawn to this, and slowly but surely the ideas will spread, and we'll see the results of that.
It certainly feels like school choice is right at the core of all that. The idea that so many people are just being churned out to believe that government is essentially the solution to all problems, and if we want to address a problem in society, well, let's vote on it, right? Instead of let the market decide, and that means all of us voluntarily interacting with each other to figure out the best solutions that might not be the same for all of us. So yeah, but that does bring up I guess a question. I was wondering, you talked about a lot of the different things you're fighting for, I guess parents and kids' rights in schools, and a lot of other places where liberties are being trampled on too. What are some of your biggest successes that you guys have had there over at the Liberty Justice Center?
Well, our biggest success, our biggest claim to fame, is a Supreme Court decision a few years ago called Janus versus AFSCME. This is a case where the where the Supreme Court had to consider whether the government can force its employees to give money to a union as a condition of having a government job. And for a long time, the government could do that. If you were a teacher in a unionized public school, well, you didn't have to technically join the union, but you did have to give the union your money every paycheck. They would take some out and give it to the teachers union. And then, of course, the teachers union would turn around and use that to advocate for all kinds of things about teacher pay, things about what kids should be taught, very active in politics, of course, the teachers unions. And we argue that this is a violation of First Amendment rights, because you are being forced to pay for somebody else's political advocacy, essentially, when you're forced to give money to a union. And you shouldn't have to give up your rights just because you take a government job. The government, as a general rule, the government can't condition benefits on you giving up your constitutional rights. Because if it could do that, it could just sort of buy off everybody's constitutional rights by taking over sectors of the economy and then saying, well, if you want this stuff, you got to give up your rights. So we represented a state employee in Illinois named Mark Janus, who objected to this. He saw the government unions in Illinois are horrible, always advocating for more spending, more pension benefits. The state's finances are a mess because of this, of course. In California, you may be familiar with this concept. And he objected to this, and of course the unions will say, well, we're doing this to benefit you. We're getting you more money, and you just want the benefits without paying for what we're doing for you, and that's not fair. You shouldn't be able to free ride on our efforts. But of course, not everyone who works for government necessarily thinks it's right or fair that their neighbors in the private sector, who may be struggling because of the state's bad economy, should have to pay more in taxes. So that argument doesn't make sense. And of course, even if it was true, it's not a good reason to violate your First Amendment rights. The First Amendment doesn't have an exception to stop free riding. And so we made these arguments ultimately at the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court agreed with us that that is a violation of First Amendment rights. And as a result of that, millions of government workers across the country who were previously forced to give money to a union out of every paycheck have a choice as to whether they want to be union members and do that, or not be union members and not give the union anything. So that's That's our biggest success, our biggest claim to fame. But another relatively recent big one involves the federal OSHA vaccine mandate, where they were going to force a huge chunk of private sector workers to be vaccinated as a condition of keeping their jobs. We filed the first federal lawsuit against that in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And the Fifth Circuit immediately stayed that OSHA vaccine mandate so that it didn't take effect. And then ultimately the Supreme Court struck that down as well.
I did not know, Jacob, I did not know that you guys were behind the Janus decision, because I personally benefited from, I was working for the state of California at the time, and I personally benefited from that decision. And I'm so grateful for the outcome. So I guess I have to personally thank you and your center for that. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad you benefited from that. Now, of course, that isn't all over. And as much as the unions still try to trap people into paying dues, in California, they get to go meet with people who get government jobs and say whatever they want to them. And then they get them to sign a union card and okay, here's a union member, take their money. And now the challenge is to make sure that people are advised of their rights before they sign those cards. And that's the focus of our fight along those lines now, making sure, sort of like with a Miranda warning, that you have the right not to sign this thing before you do, and the government can prove that you had that information. So there's still more work to be done there, but I'm glad we got you out of that and so many others who had been forced to hand over their money.
That's great.
Well, Jacob, we're coming in right near the end of the time for the show, and so I wanted to see if there was any last thoughts you wanted to share. Maybe if you had time, if you wanted to share any of the challenges you guys are facing as well. But certainly, wrap up with the last thoughts, and I put the website up there too, so people can know where to go to as well if they want more information. So go ahead, Jacob.
Well, we're always looking for more cases. So if you see violations of constitutional rights going on, please go to our website and get in touch with us. As I mentioned, if you're somebody who happens to have been trapped into paying union dues in a government job and you want to get out of it, well, we'd love to hear from you and see if we can help you with that. Otherwise, you can go to the website, see the stuff we've been working on, and the website is libertyjusticecenter.org.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jacob. And by the way, if you enjoyed this discussion, we're going to have Mark on shortly for another show where we're going to get into some of the specific cases that they're working on. One of them, if you're here in California, you might really be interested, and that's the one where the California legislature is trying to silence doctors from being able to talk about COVID and other things if it's not on their script. But thanks so much again, Jacob, for joining us today. And thank you all for watching. And until the next time, stay free.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.